Griffith did nothing wrong is the way everyone who does a Griffith analysis starts their damn video. It's the meme revolving around the guy, and therefore the psychology behind its origin is obviously fascinating, as Griffith is the perceived antagonist of the entire series. I don't really want to mince words, and I'll try not to cover ground I've seen other analyses cover, but I generally dislike an analysis played off that meme, and that's because, generally speaking, they all say the same basic thing. Do the ends justify the means? Is it worth Griffith sacrificing his loyal comrades to create Falconia, a paradise in this wretched earth? Now don't get me wrong, I love that philosophical dilemma as much as the next guy, but with Griffith, it does not exist. Well, at least not in the form that I see most people take it to heart, and I will get to it much later in the video. On my first read through of Berserk, I got a totally different, and what I still believe to be a more accurate vibe. Griffith is the ultimate antithesis to Guts, which plays out in so many ideological fashions, it's almost impossible to think this whole story was written by one mere human. Now, I've recently done a full analysis on Guts, and without exaggeration, it took me weeks to write, and it's my proudest video I've ever made to date. And if not, then at least top 3. Even though I got copy strike the day after uploading it by some individual claiming I used their music. Fuck that guy. So link to that video is in the description and at the end of the video, and if you want to get the full Nux Berserk experience, feel free to give it a watch. First would be better, but is very much not mandatory, and that's because I find Guts to actually be a far deeper, more fascinating character than even Griffith. That's not an insult to Griffith, but more of praising Guts, and it's also a sentiment that's generally not shared. I find Guts as a character to be more fascinating, but at the same time, I find the narrative surrounding Griffith to be far more fascinating. If I'd have to label Guts' 2 ultimate attributes, it would be his steadfast grasp of humanity, despite the forces pulling him astray, and his vision of an honest reality no matter how gruesome. And again, watch the Guts video if you want to fight me on these. I don't like to repeat myself, and I find that generally the fan base doesn't like it either, so that makes sense and everyone's happy. But these are the same 2 attributes that Griffith discards fundamentally. He's eager to discard his humanity for power, and as far as honest reality, well, he believes that to be the ultimate naivete. He's operated via deception back in the Golden Age arc, and even now, in his reborn state, he adorns his flag as a messiah, and his angelic serenity is the ultimate facade to his actual identity. He's clothed in lies, whereas Guts gives absolutely no pretexts of false appearances. As I've mentioned, this is the side of Griffith I've picked up on during my first read-through of Berserk. And while I still believe it to be completely accurate in entirety, my second read-through is focused on understanding Griffith for this analysis specifically as an individual. And my conclusion is yes, he is a fascinating character. And no, it's not because he believes in the philosophy that the end justifies the means. As I genuinely believe, simplicity is the hardest thing to master, and Griffith proves me right on all fronts. The claim to the fact that Griffith's reasoning must be the end justifies the means comes solely from an outsider looking at Griffith's actions. As we know, he did bad things, and right now, humanity lives in a paradise. Must be the ends justifies the means! But in some of my recent videos, as you know, I've been looking into character psychology a lot, because I find that understanding that alone really helps understand the character itself, and paint their actions in a different light than may otherwise be perceived from the outside. So the next segment of this analysis will be split into 2 parts. Firstly, his mentality that caused the actions to take place, and secondly, why he's among the 5 greatest villains in all of anime. Griffith is the epitome of insatiable. He's power hungry and will stop at nothing to grow in status and strength. And this is clear. He admits to considering the Band of the Hawk as his tools. He'll screw anyone for political power, literally. He loved the princess for her rank, not her individual personality. He was born as a nothing, and he had the resolve to become a something. This is how he was introduced, and every manipulative ploy was for this one goal. In the entirety of the series, until his breaking point, everything went his way, big or small. And to stress my point on the faltering of his psychology, when someone gets everything they want, they develop a complacency complex, and their ego grows to the point of no return, where everything just must go their way. Well, their way, or the highway. In simpler terms, it creates a spoiled brat. So much like Bakugo from My Hero Academia, he had everything he wanted until he didn't. Bakugo, who was always the special one, lost what made him special, and he lost it, just like Guts abandoned Griffith, and he lost it. Now, I talked about this single turning point in my Guts analysis, but it resonates with both Guts and Griffith's themes perfectly for the narrative, because herein lies the difference in the psychological meltdown of Bakugo versus Griffith. Bakugo initially held the goal of becoming the #1 hero, so despite being wrenched out of his comfort zone, to put it lightly, his self-imposed purpose was not taken away and was very much within his grasp. Even when the League of Villains tried to taunt him to become a villain, he was steadfast in his ideology of becoming a hero. Oh, but Griffith was different. He was the legendary, undefeated White Hawk. Griffith never had a set benchmark goal whatsoever, and his precisely that makes him so terrifying. Not only that, but it's completely novel. Every quintessential cliche villain has the goal to take over the world, but Griffith doesn't. My original description of him was insatiable, and that's what he is. Never satisfied where he is, with his sights constantly set higher and higher. So, back to the Bakugo contrast. Bakugo's goal is still fulfillable, and he'll therefore keep it together, at least to an extent, and can half-heartedly accept that he still has room to grow. Griffith losing Guts destroyed him. Not just the brawn that went along with Guts when he left, but his complacent mentality of constant, consistent growth was shattered with Guts announcing his departure, and was further destroyed when Guts handily defeated him in a duel, clearly surpassing him, even though Griffith was more powerful in their last match. Much like the overdeveloping, spoiled brat he was, he then let his frustration out to attempt to replace what he's lost, and plowing the princess may do the trick. That was the end of human Griffith. Thematically, every action he takes makes complete sense under the psychological outlines I've highlighted, and so does the eclipse. He'd metaphorically climb the mountain of his allies' corpses to reach new heights. The manga pointed that out plainly, and that's what he has his allies for altogether. I believe this properly explains his philosophy as far as the events of the unfurling narrative, and your mom gay if you think it doesn't. So with that in mind, people claiming that his actions represents the ideology that the ends justify the means, cause look at Falconia! Guys, you're trying too hard to make Griffith a far more morally ambiguous person than he is. I don't believe in trying to find things that aren't there, especially when trying to do that with, you know, literal masterpieces like Berserk. Mostly because, Miura knows what he's doing a lot better than us commentators do, so let's not warp his words too much here. Simplicity is the hardest thing to master, and this mentality is so far seemingly pretty damn simple. So from here on out, now that I've explained his psychology and hopefully didn't scare a lot of you away because it's not as grandiose as others portray it to be, now I can get into why Griffith is one of the greatest villains known to fiction, whether it was realized consciously or not. Here's the fruits of my labor regarding rereading half of Berserk for this video. Now I realize you may not even like it. Well, to get in the right mindset and the right vibe, let's forget about Golden Age Griffith for a bit, because the truth of the matter is, our perception of Griffith himself is obviously greatly affected by the travesties he's committed in the past, and rightfully so. That's not the full point here, and honestly, I'd suggest everyone rereading the Griffith chapters with that mentality. Granted, it may require vast meditation to get that mindset, but it was an exercise I'm glad I did. And to someone that never did this ridiculous sounding proposal, you'll probably think I'm insane. But in Griffith's final battle against the Kushan Empire, I was legitimately brought to the verge of tears like 5 times. Oh my god, I've never been so embarrassed writing an analysis video before! I mean, I've said some crazy shaky schnizzle in my satire videos, but this is insanity, and it's because of that second read-through that Berserk is my favorite manga of all time. Griffith confronts the remaining Midland Army generals and says, "I must become the leader here, fam! It's the only way!" Okay, he didn't say it like that, he's way more serene and stuff, but I'm not, so suck it, Griffith. Needless to say, the generals were not all too pleased that someone of common birth would ever propose such a thing. But one after another, everything fell into place. Simultaneously, the princess declared Griffith as her betrothed, all the children in the cities had dreams of a glimmering white hawk piercing the darkness, and the Pope himself at that moment arrived and fully prostrated himself before Griffith, declaring him to be the savior of the world. This is more than enough reason for the Midland Knights to give him control over, well, everyone. The Kushan Empire was the new world power, and something needed to be done, and it was this common-born beacon of hope that can actually do that. Hope for everyone in the world, but especially hope for someone born not to nobility. And so, Griffith became the benevolent ruler of the Allied forces. His serene grace and charismatic silence was deafening. He was the one that could bring redemption, but it won't be easy. After all, the Kushan Empire is not a force to be toyed with. Even every soldier in the Allied forces wouldn't be enough to take on the supernatural opponent they were coming to face. That is, if we were thinking in the old wavelength. Something incredible about Griffith, as I've mentioned, he's the antithesis to Guts. His major recurring attributes throughout the entire thematic narrative were his A, disregard of humanity, and B, facaded, dishonest reality. They are the two aspects that are literally the ideologic makeup of Griffith in the grand scale tale of Berserk. But as I've mentioned, after all that mediation and weed and stuff, looking at Griffith post-apocalypse only, what exactly are his thematic, two ultimate defining attributes? Yeah, so this common-born, alleged human doesn't believe and will not conform to nobility. Griffith is the one to lead and will not concur with the deception misconception that nobility makes someone of greater value. In fact, that entire misconception must be destroyed. Furthermore, the essence of humanity is the acceptance that everyone is different, and the acceptance of everyone, whether it's a difference in status as far as how they're born, mentally, or physically. But let's think, why does that need to apply to only humans as a species? Belief in humanity uses humanity as an ideology, not literally. All races should be treated equally, whether literal humans or other sentient beings. And that's the ideology that Griffith pushes. In his final battle with Kushan, he requires drawing assistance from humanity and demonkind. Only humans and apostles working together can overcome this vast threat, and they do. For the first time in history, these two seemingly opposing races were uniting, adorning the same flag, fighting the same battle, and bearing the same ideology. Griffith caused the ultimate peace via destroying discrimination at its core. He embraced the hypothesis that demons and humans can coexist, and he made it a reality, creating the supernation of Falconia, stressing the importance of individuality and not discriminating against one another despite being seemingly sworn enemies by fate. And remember, we're only looking at this post-eclipse. He's the most kind-hearted, selfless, benevolent ruler the world has ever known in its tragic, formerly dark history, and the world was at last seemingly shed in a powerful possibility of eternal illumination. And fam, those are the same two exact attributes that Guts' meta-narrative contains. They're the same two attributes that are the antithesis to full story Griffith. But if you're only looking at post-apocalypse, the entire story reverses. And those two attributes that in reality are the antithesis to Griffith, just getting half a story, they are the embodiment of Griffith. And yes, reading Berserk with that perspective is unquantifiably terrifying, but constant feels blasts nonetheless. That kinda explains my much earlier statement that I find Guts as a character to be a far more interesting specimen, but from a narrative perspective, nothing tops Griffith. Alrighty, so now that we've thematically defined Griffith's character as properly as possible, and I must say, I'm pretty damn happy with how this came out so far, let's talk Berserk's legendary ambiguity, and where the infamous "do the ends justify the means" line really falls into place. Very much not what I expected before rereading the manga, but I vehemently believe my interpretation to be fairly accurate. And that question is, what the heck do we do now? The way Griffith's been written looking at the full story is he is the main villain of the narrative. He's done more than his fair share of evil shit, and he's clearly the thematic nemesis to Guts, who absolutely plays the role of our main good guy. That being said, from a narrative perspective, we should obviously be rooting for Griffith's demise. Now, that statement I've just made is purely the perspective perpetuated by the narrative, and a very objective one at that. As I've mentioned, coming into the story only looking at Griffith post-eclipse, and his story looked like he's the godsend savior the world desperately needed. These wonderful actions he's done only becomes a facade retroactively once it's in the perspective of the greater tale, where all the good and truth he advocates for makes a complete 180, and those same actions in our minds becomes the epitome of evil. But that in of itself is a fascinating question. If someone's actions are good and their mindset is evil, is that person evil? And well, the answer to that would be yeah. He, as an individual, is an evil dude. But the follow-up question is where things get scary. Is it a bad thing if he's evil? If he's only doing good for everyone, like Griffith is doing right now, why should we care about his impure, self-centered intentions? The outcome is, he's doing good. That's truly where the line, "do the ends justify the means," applies in regard to Griffith, with the ends being his actions, which are good, and the means being his mentality, which is evil. So with that said, I think enough groundwork's been done to talk about the fascinating ambiguity between Guts and Griffith that remains as one of the driving forces of Berserk's entire tale. What do we do now? We have Guts, the most human character in all of anime, a flawlessly written, flawed character. No one ever claimed he's a justice seeker. Some claim him to be a man that's seen too much, and link in the description, but he's out for Griffith's blood, and no explanation is required as to why he may not want to shake hands and make friends with the guy that betrayed and wiped out everyone close to him, tried to kill Guts himself, and then raped his love in front of his eyes while keeping eye contact with Guts the whole time. Yeah, I'd hate the bastard too. If that were me, in fact, I may just want to execute my raw thirst for revenge and dedicate my life to try and destroy the guy. And that's exactly Guts' mentality in that regard as well. It's very justified from a character standpoint as far as writing a human character, and it very much fits Guts' themes perfectly as well, being the ultimate human and the seeker for truth and reality. But let's be honest, would killing Griffith really benefit the world at this point? Right now, yeah, Griffith is definitely still a schmuck, but he's a schmuck internally. Externally, the world definitely needs him. Would Guts really be in the right to kill him if he can? To the ends, i.e. killing Griffith, a horrible being deserving of death, justify the means, i.e. stripping the world of of its savior, facade or not. Like everything in this brilliant series, every moral standing and attribute gets applied to both sides of this bleak tale. And despite how much we bounce these ideals back and forth and embrace the epic ambiguity of right and wrong, the narrative tells us that justice is on Guts' side. Structurally, Guts is gonna be victorious come the end of the story if we ever get there. Only God knows how he'll overpower the Griffster, but that's irrelevant to the philosophy of the story. But if Guts actually wins and Guts beats Griffith, then that will be Miura's answer to this brilliantly ambiguous moral tirade. Griffith's power-hungry, insatiable mentality must be put to an end, regardless of the wonderful deeds he does, because what will be the next level for him? His hunger will not be satisfied with merely becoming the supreme ruler of humanity, and as we know, he treats his subjects as pawns and stepping stones to his next goal. There is nothing stopping an ethical monster from committing monstrous acts, regardless of the wonderful yet obviously extremely self-beneficial actions he's currently committing. This is not saying a bad person can't change. Anyone can change. Griffith ain't trying to change. At the end of the day, he's still trying to manipulate humans and demons indiscriminately. Guts does not need to make the philosophical calculations as far as fighting Griffith. That goes against the blatant humanity of his character. If it were up to Guts, he would do the morally ambiguously wrong thing if it involved killing Griffith and getting his revenge. Guts won't be ethical Jesus cause he ain't supposed to be ethical Jesus. We ain't watching shonen. But unbeknownst to the world of Berserk, the entire universe is solely reliant on him to save them from a fate furthest from their minds, becoming a pile of corpses tall enough for a great liar to reach new heights standing upon them. I mean, I could be wrong with my interpretation of the outcome of the series, as the series has yet to be concluded. Miura, please, enough with the Idolmaster stuff. But as far as Griffith's character and the full series ambiguity, I think I did a pretty good job, and I'm personally really pridefully content that this take of his character is finally here on YouTube somewhere. Link to my Guts video, as I've mentioned, in the description. Feel free to check it out for my full take on the driving force of Berserk, and maybe it'll also give more basis to what I said here as well, as I wasn't too keen on repeating the points I've mentioned there. Feel free to subscribe for more in-depth philosophical analyses or wacky satire stuff because I'm weird. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and comment your opinion on Griffith's character, on future videos you want, or on your take of this style analysis video. I'm always looking to improve. I'd appreciate all the praise, all the criticism, and all the memes you guys leave in the comments. Link to my Twitter, my merch, and my Patreon below. Clicking any of them really helps the channel. All patrons are invited to the Discord server. I hope to see you all there. Huge thanks to the current patrons: Christopher Wilson, Elazar, Lazy Ronin, TMFilly, Rari, Sash, MD, JD Fincher, Q Zindergarten, Axel, and an anonymous member. The 5 Lord Tweegers: Carlos Martin, Tyler Schumacher, Gavin Anderson, and Large Blab. And the 4 Gadus Up Rank: Zachary Wheatley, Yokai, Dark Element, and Ezedric. Your support is extremely appreciated. As well as everyone who's watched this video, your time is greatly appreciated. It means the world to me to know that you guys enjoy this content enough to actually spend your time sitting through an entire video. I know I say it every time, but it is appreciated every time. It truly is. So, look forward to seeing you next time. Have yourself a most wonderful evening, and remember to stay weird, fam.